Good evening. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Gehrig?
Here.
Pepcorn?
Here.
Preston? Here. Strand?
Here.
Mahoney?
Here. Health. February is American Heart Month, dedicated to creating awareness that heart disease is a leading cause of death for Americans and encourage everybody to adopt healthy lifestyles. Being physically active, eating healthier foods, getting enough sleep, tracking blood pressure and cholesterol, and practicing self-care are all the things that can improve your heart health. Staying up to date with all the immunizations, including flu and COVID-19 vaccine, are also important. The library. The 6th Annual Northern Narratives 2022 Writing Project is accepting submissions of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction writing through March 31st, 2022. The project is for adults and teens aged 13 and older. The Pause for Reading program is a monthly event for emerging readers and features animals from therapy pets of the Red River Valley. The next session is February 12th at 10 a.m. And the Get Smitten with Reading Winter Reading Program for readers of all ages runs through March 6th. Participants can read to earn chances to enter prize drawings. Planning. The September apartment vacancy rate in Fargo was 4.4%, down from the 5.45% in 2020 and the 9.33% in 2019. There are more than 600 new apartment units came online in 2021. The city issued building permits for 829 new multifamily housing units in 2021, down from the 1,141 in 2020. Police. The Fargo Police Department recently had 14 members of the department complete a 3-day in-person training for the First Line Leadership Training Program, which is designed to meet the needs of the current and aspiring sworn and civilian first line supervisors. The program focuses on 3 elements of leadership: the leader, the follower, and the situation. By the end of this course, attendees will have set up strategies and tools to call upon when making decisions, inspiring followers, and achieving organizational goals. In the last few weeks, the Fargo Police Department Training and Development Unit has been attending career fairs at UND, Alexandria Tech, NDSU, and NDSCS to recruit potential members for lateral transfers, job opportunities, and upcoming Fargo Police Department academies. Tonight, we are going to see the first of the 4 video chapters of the 2022 State of the City of Fargo. This is the completion of the story of Fargo's successes over the past year and the unlimited trajectory for 2022 and beyond. Here we go.
We know that infrastructure drives success, and we're committed to protecting taxpayers' investments into roads by continually engaging in intricate and scientific pavement assessment processes to address minor repairs before they turn major. Fargo is leading the way by continuing to make major roadways even safer for pedestrians through our 32nd Avenue facelift, which will reduce instances of speeding and add trees. We are responding to growth by pushing forward on the 64th Avenue overpass, which will be ready to serve our residents, as well as big projects such as the Career Academy and the new Fargo Sports Complex. Embracing technology innovations to improve safety is a major priority in Fargo. We just introduced remote-controlled lawnmowers to use on steep embankments along and near roadways this year. The fire department's drones and their high-quality thermal imaging are preventing and protecting against the loss of life during major fires, identifying hot spots within buildings, and protecting nearby properties from the spread of flames. We know that neighborhoods are the core building blocks of our community and are doubling down on code enforcement to tackle dangerous and blighted properties. And now, in conjunction with the Core Neighborhoods Plan, efforts will focus on addressing the root of issues before they snowball into major challenges. We are rapidly working to finish an implementation plan, which will put the Core Neighborhood Plan into action for the residents of the city of Far More. The Utility Box Cover Program will be dramatically expanded in 2022, bringing public art not only to the downtown neighborhood, but throughout all of Fargo. Fargo is proud to have dedicated foresters on our team to oversee and nurture our urban forests. Here's a fun fact. In the last year alone, our crews planted more than 1,700 trees of 37 different species. This commitment is one of many reasons Fargo has been recognized as a Tree City USA for more than 40 consecutive years. We are ensuring your streets are lit and lit well to promote safety. For the last 7 years, Fargo has methodically utilized geographic information systems data and maps to identify areas where proper lighting was lacking and install street lighting. The final project within this plan was successfully completed in 2021. A growing city requires an evolving approach to successfully serving it. Currently, Fargo Public Works has one central station to refuel its fleet. Due to our community's expansion over the last several years, this has proven a bit inefficient, as crews working in South Fargo need to spend time and energy traveling north to refuel. To remedy this, Public Works is advancing on its new Southside fueling station. This new facility will produce more efficiencies when refueling and allow crews to return to their routes faster to serve you even better. A commitment has been made in the 2022 budget to support an additional snow removal route, as well as an additional motor grader to ensure Team Fargo is equipped with the resources needed to conquer snowfall around the clock and ensure you can safely hit the road sooner. The planning for Fargo Fire Station number 8 in South Fargo will continue to progress in 2022. This new station will be crucial in adding capacity and shorter response times to provide critical emergency response services to the rapidly growing Fargo area. Through its strong and enduring metro partnerships, the City of Fargo is continually seeking ways to improve. It is important to reflect on the successful partnerships and what made them truly effective. For example, the new Spirit of the Sandbagger Archway in downtown Fargo was funded entirely by the Fargo Lions Club using private donations. This piece of art along the riverfront honors the selfless service and commitment of our city's past sandbagging flood fighters. This beautiful idea became reality by embracing public-private partnerships. An enhanced MAP bus route in the industrial park was a big success of 2021. In what began as a pilot project organized through the United Way, this route provides daily transportation for industrial park workers and is the latest addition to the MAP bus service map. More than 5,000 customers utilize MAP bus each day. The regionalization of the Fire Department Training Academy is another way Fargo utilizes its metro partnerships to provide more service for lower costs. By combining efforts with West Fargo Fire, training costs are reduced and skill sets are standardized, making mutual aid events even more successful. Our community values education, from preschool to adult education, and Fargo families are fortunate to have high-achieving public and private schools available to our students. In recent years, all of our local schools have been navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, changing protocols and instructional delivery models when necessary to ensure students can learn in a safe and effective environment. The majority of the city of Fargo is served by the Fargo Public School District, which educates around 11,300 students in kindergarten through grade 12. In fall 2021, Fargo Public Schools opened the Explorer Academy, an addition onto Lewis and Clark Elementary School. The Explorer Academy is North Dakota's first K-8 special education public school with integrated project-based and gross motor program opportunities. The Explorer Academy environment was designed to meet students at their level of need, rather than having them fit into traditional academic settings. Another success story is the growth and development of Aldevron. This Fargo-based bioscience corporation helps fortify the community as a tremendous leader in the medical and technology industries. The city played a role in its development through the offering of targeted tax incentives to improve its economy, create a larger and sustainable tax base, and spur the creation of high-paying jobs.
Very good. Item C, is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 24th, 2022 regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 20?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Strand,
Yes.
Garrick,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Preston,
Aye.
Mahoney.
Ed. In-person speakers, we have Brandon Krieger to speak today. We remind you, let's not use names. If there's issues or statements people have made, just refer them to as a commissioner may have said. We'd like to keep away from the names that is part of this comment period. Thank you.
So today I'm here to express any opinions, but I'm here to just highlight a couple of headlines which I think the commission's been a part of that the community should be aware of. So first, my sadness in that, and apologies, I'm using a name in a bad way, but Commissioner Gary is ending his time with us, which makes me kind of sad. No matter how differing his opinions were and how much I disagreed with him, he knew the process, he was unwavering in his beliefs, and I always felt his knowledge of the commission and its ins and outs were always sharp. Good luck in whatever you do next. And then the second thing I want to highlight is that this Friday there was a ruling on the new zoning laws that took into effect, and a few months ago, with a 4-1 vote, the city chose to take it to court. And for now, we have a victory. As we wait to see if it will be appealed, I want to thank Mayor Mahoney, Commissioner Preston, Commissioner Strand, and Commissioner Pepcorn for voting to challenge this new law, and lastly, Eric Johnston for his diligent research on the ordeal. Thank you.
Well, let's see. Our resolution on the fund is not a public hearing, right? We can go to that. Item 22, a resolution directing the insurance of refunding improvement bonds, Series 2022A, and prescribing the terms and covenants thereof, therefore, and resolutions selling, establishing terms, and directing the issuance of definitive improvement warrants on the funds of certain improvement districts, and providing for and appropriating special assessments for the support and maintenance of said funds. Mike Redlinger to explain.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I will introduce the item this evening, and I also want to introduce a couple of presenters from Baker Tilly in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Terry Heaton and Brad Elmer are here to talk through the sale that occurred this morning at 10 o'clock on the refunding improvement bonds. These are our bonds that will be repaying our capital improvement fund. These will be special assessed later this fall. The suggested motion is in your packet this evening, and it is to approve a resolution authorizing this issuance. And so I'll turn it over to Terry, to Brad. They'll talk about our sale that occurred this morning at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Brad Elmer. I'm with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors out of our Madison, Wisconsin office, and pleased to report that we had a very successful bond sale this morning. The city sold approximately $24.685 billion in refunding improvement bonds to finance a variety of utilities, street, alley, and street lighting projects. We did accept bids at 10 o'clock this morning. We received 7 bids, and the winning bid was from Baird. They were the low bidder with a true interest cost of 2.45. The cover bid, or the second lowest bid, was from Citigroup at 2.49. So a very close sale, just 4 basis points between the first and second, which is a sign of a really good competitive sale. Over recent months and weeks, rates have been ticking up. When we first looked at this sale in January, we estimated a rate of about 2.19. As recently as last week, we were estimating that the rate would be around 2.65. So feel pretty good that we picked a good day here for a sale and wound up at 2.45. So congratulations, very successful sale. As part of this process, we do conduct a call with the rating agencies. These bonds are rated, And Terry's going to make a few remarks regarding that process.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Commission, the Moody's report was very favorable for the city. They affirmed your AA2 rating, and they included a stable outlook. And of course, after the pandemic and everything you're going through, that's always a relief. There were a lot of big items in the notes that we had in the rating. We talked about all the jobs with Amazon, 1,000 jobs being offered, building permits reaching a record level, 763 million, and new commercial permits at 250 million, all this positive activity coming into the economy. The contract for the construction of the diversion project going forward, and significant sales tax increase of about 16.9% over 2020. We highlighted it, the call, and also a lot of information about how strong the budgeting, the budget to actuals were for all the city funds and for the general fund in particular. And so a very good pat on the back as far as all of that going, and especially looking with Mr. Costin retiring, it's nice to see him being able to go out on a very high note. They did talk about all the strengths you have, your growing region, and so forth. They talked about all of that, the revenue raising flexibility, and healthy operations, and that they expect that to continue. And they note that you do have elevated levels of debt, but also noted that 90% of your debt is repaid from assessments as opposed to a tax levy. So it doesn't tie up the city's resources to that extent. And all of the key indicators, they give us graphs and show us going across. They were all stronger and have been improved over the past year. So it's a very good pat on the back for the City Commission, for the leadership at this time. So just wanted to share that news.
Terry, can you share that with all the commissioners sometime, just to send it to their emails, please? The report you have right now?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the commission? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Preston? Aye. Garrick?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Yes. Jan Eliason, is she on the screen, or? Oh, you're here. I'm sorry. Didn't see you there, Jan. Report update on the homelessness of the city of Fargo.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving us a little bit of time to talk about this. I'd like to start by saying we've done a lot of things in the community to really improve how we tackle the issue of homelessness. We have new programs, new housing supports, all sorts of different things that are really rooted in evidence-based models to try and tackle the issue of homelessness. That being said, COVID, of course, has caused us considerable challenges. It's not the only challenge, but I'd have to say it's one of the most influential challenges that we continue to face. The shelter system itself, we collaborate so much. We communicate with each other. We try to make sure that anybody who's seeking shelter has shelter. However, it comes with more challenges, I would say, last year and this year than we've seen previously. During times where the temperatures really become incredibly dangerous, we have to figure out a place for people to be, clearly, but we also know that by bringing folks indoors, we're creating a riskier environment for the spread of COVID as well. So while we've tried to keep our numbers down in the Gladys Ray shelter, for example, we thought that ideally we could provide shelter for 25 people a night. In the last 60 days, we've averaged 33 or more on any given night, and that has certainly caused some challenges for us in terms of trying to stop the spread of COVID. Obviously, COVID has caused a considerable amount of stress for individuals too that are seeking shelter because they know that shelters themselves, in just by nature, are a higher risk setting. So while we continue to collaborate with other shelters, they're facing the same things we are. They're trying to make sure there's enough space for people that need a place to be, make sure there's enough space to provide isolation or quarantine opportunities. Most of that is isolation at this point. We've provided isolation at the downtown facility. We were up to right around 20, 21 people for an extended period of time, and which was really difficult just simply because of staffing issues, but that's dropped considerably. We have, I think, about 3 or 4 people in there right now. Hopefully we can kind of ride out the rest of COVID, I guess, with these lower numbers, but we never know what's going to come next. Some of the additional challenges that have been I would say that have persisted over time now would include, and I think that I can speak for all shelters when I say that not only is space an issue, but even when we have additional space to provide more overflow, we don't have enough staff at this point to provide overflow in those spaces. We continue to be understaffed at the Gladys Ray and within the harm reduction division of public health. It's tough to find people. You know, I know that it's the story for most industries right now. Before COVID, we were really struggling finding direct service staff in facilities across the country, and now here we are with COVID, making that an even more problematic situation. In general, though, I don't know that we're seeing any more. We haven't seen necessarily an increase in the number of people that are homeless, but we have just found more and more challenges in providing the safest space for them to be. Let's see, so some of the other things that put pressure on the shelter system, I know when the jail was having big challenges related to COVID, they were discharging people from the jail. We've seen hospitals discharging a little bit sooner or maybe less likely to admit. It's just like this cycle that's just happening, and I don't know if there's a way to stop it other than ride out the pandemic, you know, the best we can. I think the greatest challenge that we face is just not enough staff. The staff that we do have in our programs right now are tired. They're working a ton of overtime. We have reduced services in other areas. For example, we've gotten single-staffed in some programs. Mobile outreach, we've limited the hours at times just because we don't have the staff to operate that and also operate withdrawal management in the shelter and so on. Withdrawal management has provided some beds for overflow as well from the shelter so we can try to get more space in between people. So again, I don't know that we're seeing more people that are homeless. I think we're just seeing more challenges related to trying to figure out where people can be. Do you have any questions?
Jan, you've been doing an excellent job with your team. I know that there have been different challenges with the COVID as well, but I just want to thank you for that. And the city's made some investment in this as well to have shelter space for people. So I think you need to be congratulated for all your hard work. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, and thank you, Jan, and to your team of people for the remarkable work you do every single day in challenging times. You know, in the last several years, one thing that catches my eye is when we have headlines notifying us of deaths in the community. And to my knowledge, we've gone a few years. There was one person a year or two ago found that I don't know if was homeless directly or not or in your system, but that's that's a measure of your success, especially when the weather we're having is so extreme that we're not having these deaths out there that used to be way too routine. So commend yourselves for that. You're saving people's family members. I have a really basic question. Who are the homeless? I know you mentioned hospital releases and jail releases, but we hear about vets and veterans of service, and we hear of mentally ill and behavioral challenged people. But from your perspective, so we have the sense of that bigger picture, who are the homeless folks?
I think that they're everyone. I think that everybody is represented within that group of folks that are facing homelessness. We have so many shelter beds, and we do a pretty decent job of counting and trying to come up with the best picture we can. How many people are, single unaccompanied males or females, family members? I think we try to do a good job of that, but ultimately it's really tough for us here to know how many people are experiencing homelessness. The folks that work in this arena, we believe it's fairly close to 1,000 in our community on any given night, just because of the number of people that are doubled up or precariously housed, couch surfing, just going wherever they can. I would say that, we say that the people that are homeless are just simply people that don't have any place to live. All of the other things are secondary to that. And, I can't give you stats today on, I guess, the number of veterans. We've done a great job in the community. We've put a lot of resources into ending veteran homelessness in the community. But I don't have stats for you on the number of families, I guess, today, although I could get those for you without any issue. But I would say I don't know that we we know exactly at this point because so many people are in such dire straits because of the pandemic and some other factors.
Commissioner Preston?
Jan, remind me, I have two questions actually. Remind me of when the timing of the coalition report that would probably answer Commissioner Strand's questions. They do an annual report, right?
Yes, we have a point in time count that we participate in. That was last week. It was on the 26th, 27th, right in there, where we do try to get out and find, put together the best picture of the number of people that are that don't have a place to live. It's a little bit more challenging here because we're also doing that in January when it becomes more difficult to figure out who's out there. I'm not sure when it usually comes out within a couple of months, and it looks at every region in North Dakota. It looks at by county and by city. So that should be coming.
My second question is, will you give us an update or a quick update on the engagement center?
I can do that. So the engagement center is the plan is that we're able to develop an engagement center in the downtown area that can provide a number of different services, somewhat like a one-stop shop. It provides opportunities for people that have been homeless or are homeless to get connected to whatever it is that they feel they need. We would have homeless health services on site and so on. We currently operate an engagement center in the old police department downtown. However, we're really limited in terms of how many services we can offer because, again, we don't have enough staff to staff it the way it would be. But in the future, it would house a number of different service providers. It would have space for different engagement activities, not just for people that we've served in the past or are serving, but also for community members to be a part of that solution. For example, we get a lot of calls from community members that want to help and want to create better opportunities or improved opportunities for the people that we've been serving. And it would create that space so those folks could come in and assist with anything from, it could be a Wellbriety model, or it could be, something to do with arts and music. It can be anything, just so that people have connections within the community that are healthy and meaningful, because we know that that's one of the things that folks need to do well in housing and to stay housed is those community connections.
Any other questions? Thank you for your report. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Recommendation to increase fee schedule for inspections department. Sean Radnick to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We're proposing a fee increase schedule for the inspections department. This schedule will be for the next 5 years, starting in 2022 and ending in 2026. We're increasing fees, the baseline fee for any permits up to $1,000 by $5 every 2 years. So in 2022, 24, and 26, we'd increase it by $5. And then anything above $1,000 would be increased by 3% every year. So this would constitute about a 16% increase for anything above $1,000 by the end of the 5-year run. I know from my previous work in other communities and stuff, the fee schedule and stuff for an inspections department is something that's neglected unintentionally. And I just want to try and get ahead of it and make sure that we have a fee schedule for the next few years that we're being transparent with our community and also allowing any projects that are coming up to know what their fees could possibly be.
Any questions, Sean? Mr. Gary?
Are fees in the city of Fargo lower than our neighbors, West Fargo, Moorhead, Horace?
Yeah, I kind of pulled around the state and looked at what their fees are and stuff. In some areas we're lagging, in other areas we're leading just slightly. Looking at stuff in Minnesota too, we lag quite a bit from other municipalities of our size in Minnesota. So within North Dakota, we're pretty fair. I mean, they're going to look at increasing fees within the next few years, so we just want to keep pace so that we're not outside the realm of anything crazy in the future. I don't want to have to raise fees by 25 or 30% one year because we haven't done anything for a while. So I'm just trying to get ahead of it and make sure that people are going to be okay with it.
Commissioner Gary?
How much of fees are your budget? What % of fees make up your budget?
I'm not 100% positive what % of fees we use for our budget. Our budget usually comes from the general
Fund. So the fees go back to the general fund, correct?
Yep.
I mean, I understand we don't want to be silly low compared to the other communities, but, and there's just a reason we're doing this, other than to keep up with other communities.
Yeah, the last time the fees were raised were in 2018, and I do know that the previous inspections director was looking at raising fees again prior to the COVID pandemic. So we're just trying to keep pace with everybody else, and I do know after looking at some of the other communities and stuff, they do need to raise fees, and they unintentionally neglect it. I know Bismarck, when I worked there, they hadn't raised fees for 20 years. I do know there's other departments within the city that haven't raised fees for quite a few years, if not over a decade. So this would just give us a chance to raise our fees for the next 5 years and then stop and reevaluate, see where we're at. If we have to stay stagnant, we will. If we have to continue to raise, depending on the market, we would.
Commissioner Gary.
My last statement is, I don't like raising fees for anything just because we haven't for a while. I'm the utilities liaison, and when they talk about thinking about raising fees, it better be better than because we haven't for a while.
Yeah, and we are slightly raising them. They're not an astronomical amount, and that's why I want to do it like this, because I want people to be able to plan and see what we're doing. If we don't raise fees now, that's fine. We'll keep plugging away the way we are.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my basic question, and Commissioner Gehrig somewhat got to this, is it appears it's not really a need budgetarily to increase the fees. It's a desire to maybe keep pace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm cautious with that. Not to take anything personally, but I just think in this day and age of everybody's costs just going through the roof, I think we need to pull in our belts every chance we can, and just to throw an increase at folks out there because we could, doesn't convince me that we should.
Sean was tasked to keep us current in our fees, and each department has to pay for its expenses as well. So the idea of him coming to before the commission is he's feeling that our fee schedule is not kept up. And every department's asked to do the same. Utilities is asked to do it. Different people are asked to do that. And he'd rather not pop it. As we all as a commission hate to pop it 5 years from now, 20-30%, because we're way behind. His analysis with comparison to other cities is this reasonable hike. We're not the top of it. We're a reasonable rate. So I think you need to consider that as well. Commissioner Preston.
When I'm looking at this, it's confusing. So as I can tell, there could be multiple fees put on any certain project. Is that right?
There is multiple fees put on, say like a commercial project, they pay their, they're going to pay their permit fee as well as a plan review fee. And then they also have electrical fees that they have to pay to the state, which we retain 90% of those. And then they have other fees for HVAC, plumbing, things like that. Those are all standard fees that everybody is charging. When I was looking at the ones in Minnesota and stuff, they do have an additional state fee that you have to pay per permit. And I couldn't find an exact percentage or an exact amount because it seems to be something that's a little, case by case basis or something. I don't know.
So when I looked at this, the thing that I would be concerned about is we're embarking on housing rehab program for the core neighborhoods, and piling more fees on top of that is a little concerning. Are there fees that are just comprehensive for like a rehab that would be a little bit of a discount?
There's no real comprehensive fees for that. We base all of our fees on the valuation of the project, that particular project. So if we're looking at a project that's $1,000, by 2026, that fee would raise from $35 to $50. So it's not a huge increase. It's $15 in 5 years, and that's not a terribly large increase. We just want to stay ahead of it and make sure that we're not popping it from $35 to $70 or $75. Yep. One thing that I do want to add, and I forgot to mention it at first, is through our code enforcement and stuff, we would like to add a fee for the third or the second re-inspect, which would be the third inspection on that particular property. The reason why we want to add this fee is we do have some issues with people not getting the things done that we're asking them to get done. And if we impose a small fee on them, it may prompt them to do some of the things that we have to do, so we don't have to bring as many dangerous buildings before commission. We don't have to start assessing things back to properties and going under that route. We're trying to be a little more proactive. And with that fee, we are going to work with people, especially people that are underprivileged. They don't have the money to really pay it. One of the caveats I spoke to my staff about is that if they're trying to rehab their house, they're trying to get those things fixed and stuff, they just don't have the money to do it right now. As long as they give us a timeline, they stick to that timeline, it could be 6 months or a year, but as long as they're sticking to that timeline, we're not going to assess a fee against them. We're just going to work with them and try and work with the public to get these things fixed as soon as we can.
One more
Preston.
question. Do you have a sense of what a normal total fee would be for a new house, say a $250,000 house? Any sense?
I kind of have to calculate it out. I don't have it right offhand. I did submit the $100,000. It was just an easy round number for me to deal with. But when we are increasing these fees, as in 3%, it is like a $4.80 fee that is assessed, or that is given for every $1,000 above $1,000 for certain fees. So it would be 3% of that. I think it goes up from like $4.80 to like $4.86 or something like that. So it's not these large increases. It's just these things we're trying to do to keep up with the pace of building.
Commissioner Pipcorn,
I'm good. Whenever you're ready for a motion, I'll make it.
ready for a motion. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. Whose portfolio is this?
It's mine, Commissioner Strand.
And were you involved, Commissioner Pepcorn, in this whole process? I'm just assuming so, but
Absolutely. And I am, if you, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I am much more in favor of gradual increases instead of every 7 years, a 7 or 10% increase. And so I think with a lot of our departments, we're trying to do that more. Trees, anything. I think it's much better to do small increases. And I think everyone's familiar, inflation and the cost of living is going up. And so I would much rather be small numbers than big numbers. So thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Preston?
Aye.
Garrick?
No.
Strand?
no.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item 25, recommendation sell city-owned property at 1 2nd Street South. Jim Gilmore to explain.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is a recommendation to sell property that was previously the Park East Apartment Building. It was required to, with the assistance and cooperation of the Diversion Authority, a dike was put up on a portion of the property, and then this is the remnant, about a little over an acre that's available for development. To give you a timeline of where we have been on this, is back in the fall of 2020, you had directed us to prepare a Riverfront renewal plan. That plan was later adopted in April 2001. And one of the activities in this plan was to sell several pieces of property within that plan boundary. In September and October of this year, you authorized resolutions authorizing the sale of these properties. In November, developers submitted proposals. And then in January of 2020, we had presentations to both our Economic Development Incentives Committee and the Renaissance Zone Authority, since these committees will be looking at whether or not the incentives that were requested by these developers are appropriate. The committee recommends, or the two committees, we had 8 voting members, and 5 of them had recommended the EPIC proposal for the building that they're referring to as Unite. The purchase price would be $1.188 million. This money actually goes back to the Diversion Authority because it came from that project, less any administrative costs that we may have. They would put up a $28 million building, including 30 condominiums, 37 apartments. There'd be 15,000 square feet of commercial space on the main floor. The parking would be either below grade or on the second floor. There's an outdoor public space that would be connected to our city property that would be accessible to these residents, other residents of the community, and the Lashkowitz high-rise redevelopment when that occurs. They will be requesting a 5-year Renaissance zone incentives, and they plan to construct or start construction in 2022. This is some images of the building, and this is an image of the site plan. You can see this was a particular building that would be on city's property. It's roughly this area, and they would build this sort of outdoor public space as part of their redevelopment. So the recommended motion is to accept the offer from Epic Companies for this property and direct staff to plat the property prior to the sale and to draft a developer agreement that would ensure that the development is consistent with city plans and the offer from the developer. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The developer is also here if you have any questions.
Mr. Garrick?
Is the Renaissance Zone exemption part of this vote?
No, that would come later. That would actually go to the Renaissance Zone Authority. They will look at the criteria and make a recommendation to you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So just
Mr.
real quick,
Peppercorn?
if you don't mind, review what happened. So we had a combined meeting of the Renaissance Zone and the economic development. It was just for the developers to have one meeting to make it a little more efficient. So like Jim said, even though the Renaissance Zone recommended which project, it still goes back to them for the Renaissance Zone funding, and then it still comes back to us. So, but I just wanted to get across what we were trying to do to make it a little more efficient. Otherwise, the developers have to do multiple meetings at multiple places. So that was the thinking behind that. And can you explain a little bit, Jim, about so even though the city has the property, it has to go back through the diversion authority. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, one of the conditions in the Diversion Authority's land management property is that any property that they acquired, often it was in the name of either the city or the county, because they provided the funding, that money would go back to them less administrative costs. So administrative costs could include the cost of platting this property, the special assessments we've paid over the years. Our accountants might come up with some other things too.
Can I add one more thing, Mr. Chair? Having this map up is a great thing because it shows the high-rise, the professional building on the left, and the gas station. And so Epic is actually working with a couple of the other projects, and then the high-rise is going to be taken down, and in its place, there is going to be housing there. It's going to be, and actually the representatives aren't here today, but he basically spoke about that at our meeting. And so I do agree with this. It's going to be kind of like a little bit of a campus, and there's going to be lots of different types of housing, and I do like that. There's a mix of, obviously it's mixed-use buildings, but it's also when you incorporate what's going to go on at the high-rise and potentially at the professional building and the gas station, it can be a combination of a lot of good things. And so that's my perspective. I think it's going to be and it's kind of our gateway to Moorhead coming across Main Avenue. And so I think it's obviously going to be a great start to coming into our city. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not prepared to vote on this particular project tonight, but I'm looking forward to ongoing discussions. And the reason I say that is this. We have 3 properties that are owned by the public. You very seldom have an opportunity to transition publicly owned assets to the private sector or to partnerships or however. That's a rare opportunity. And what I know is that we need to get the highest, greatest good for the people out of these assets that we possibly can, because the people own these properties. And I'm not saying these developers won't get us there, but I'm not prepared to yet, because having us just review these by, and I wish I'd have caught this before, but to have these solely reviewed by tax exempt committee and Renaissance committee, their job isn't the same when it comes to, their job is to vet these proposals and to look at the finances and the numbers. We have another committee, which I chair, but is the Community Development Committee. This discussion for all of these proposals needs to go before community development. And I'll remind us what the charge of the Community Development Committee is: affordable housing, downtown development, and neighborhood redevelopment. We're meeting again February 15th at Community Development. All we're focusing on lately is housing. It's almost entirely our whole discussion is housing, affordable housing, workplace housing, workforce housing. We'd be remiss not to bring that committee to the table to hear their guidance about what they think we need as well in our community. So yes, I respect the advice and welcome the advice from tax exempt review and from Renaissance committees, but we need to hear from community development. So in that light, I move that this item be brought back to the full commission after the Community Development Committee can review and weigh in at its February 15th meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for a little further discussion. And if I could ask a question. So Commissioner Strand, how do you see these three properties rolling into, does the Community Development Committee have a better sense of the needs and what kind of housing is needed?
My sense, Commissioner Preston, is this is their lane. And if there is any board or commission that's their focus, it would be community development. My sense also is that we're grasping for contemporary knowledge of what is the status of housing in the community. There are some outdated housing studies. There's a desire to have a new comprehensive approach to housing studies, but when it comes to affordability, affordable housing, accessible housing, publicly partnered projects for housing, it's community development that really should be weighing in on what the needs of the demographics of the people are.
I think the difficulty you have that with Commissioner Strand, the housing study, which MetroCog is presently doing, isn't done. It won't be done by next week. So the ability to know all those things, at least a current plan isn't out there yet. So that just makes it a little difficulty. The other thing is policy. Typically the policy is it goes through tax exempt, comes to us for approval, and we never have had the community development as part of that. So you're kind of setting up a new cog. And Commissioner Preston's question, if you recommend something different than the tax exempt committee, which one wins? Which committee do we take as a commission, or do we just sort it out when we get here? So that's just a little bit of some of that discussion. And then I think Commissioner Pepcorn, there's two other proposals coming to us, and those would be nice to have you weigh in on. But I think the commission or the committee had decided this recommendation at this time, right, Jim?
Yeah, this recommendation came forward at this time. We can certainly give a report to the Community Development Committee on these proposals and really an update on this plan. I should note this plan includes using some tax increment financing funds to assist with low-income housing in 3 different other sites within the area. So some of the future property tax revenue generated by these types of developments would then be available for affordable housing projects at other sites. I know the developers are anxious to hire their architects. If they don't get into design, they don't get into the ground this fall. And so that's sort of the reason for the timeliness of this and the others.
Commissioner Garrick.
Jim, the other proposals, all the proposals were some subset of mixed-use apartments and condos, right?
There was another proposal was strictly like that, probably a little more in a condo. Then there was a proposal from Beyond Shelter for lower income housing. However, that was a $12 million project that still had $11 million in funding gaps and simply wasn't ready to start.
Right. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is what we're looking at now is more, do you like this project or that project? Because it's going to be mixed-use apartments and condos is what's going to go there. So we can delay it, I guess, but I don't think that this committee is going to come back and say, no, we're going to build a house here or a park or something like that.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you. And again, I think we should give that committee the respect of doing what they're charged to do by this commission. But just as a comparison, for example, in the proposals for this location, one of them calls for, Beyond Shelter, calls for 51 apartments. Well, those are affordable apartments, 51, okay? The next proposal called for 57 condos. Is our intention, I'm not sure, but is our intention to gentrify downtown further? Next proposal, the one that got the divided vote, not unanimous from the committee and only 5 members, 30 condos and 37 apartments. And I'm not even sure they're affordable apartments. So it really comes down to what is our desire for what do we want to do in our downtown with assets the public owns? What do we want to translate them into for the greatest public good for the longest time? And my contention is we need to at least have the discussion about housing, affordable housing and accessible housing, not just which one brings the dollar return. Because it's more than dollars when if a private developer wanted to develop a property, that's a whole different discussion than when we're talking about a public asset that we're transitioning over to the developers to turn into what they are envisioning. So as long as that relationship is there, my hope is that we will fight for what's for the greatest good for the people. And right now, I'm not sure we know all those answers, but I certainly would welcome community development's input.
Mr. Preston.
You know, it's unfortunate, and I think all of us up here play a role in this, that we didn't have this conversation before we put the RFPs out, so that we would have a better sense of what we are going to try to accomplish. Now, I know we've got a couple of other pieces of property that will be coming up. We've done something kind of like that with the Mid-America Steel property, if I'm remembering correctly. And then there's already another piece of property that's being developed for, I believe, income-based senior housing over by the old St. John's or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So at some point here, we really should have a conversation about what role does the city play in meeting some of these housing gaps that we still don't know exactly what they are, but, getting to the point of being very targeted with the assets that we do have and where we really can determine exactly what happens on that property. Now, granted, we are in the middle of this process, so I'm not going to argue against it, but let's learn a lesson here for the next time, I'm saying.
Well, just on that point, Beyond Shelter has two other projects we're helping fund as a city. So we are helping them out on those two projects, John, as well, and which is considerable investment by the city as well. So we are investing in low-income housing, and they have two major projects they're doing as well. Commissioner Pepcorn.
So what we're doing, Mr. Chair, is we're following our policy, the Go 2030. That's what we're doing, and that's what we should do. And I fully support our housing study. I think that's going to be a great thing. That'll help us in the future. But now we're following what we've done in the past and what we should be doing now. And so that's what's going on. And so to me, trying to start this where it goes to the community development, we've never done that before ever. And so that's not appropriate. So I support. When you're ready for a motion, I'm ready to make a motion, but.
There's a motion on the table right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Dan,
Mr.
could
Chair?
you just repeat the motion so the commissioners know?
John moved that this item be brought back to the full commission after the community development meeting.
Any other discussion?
Can I ask one question?
Commissioner Preston.
So if a delay like that happened, what are we talking, community development? Are we talking the next city commission meeting, this would be brought up, or?
Yes, I assume that would be then on the 23rd. We may have one of the other sites ready by assuming that'd be the 22nd, day after Martin Luther King.
So we're talking 2 weeks.
President's Day, excuse me. But yeah, I just know that the developers will all tell you the sooner they start on the design, more likely they're going to get into the ground this fall. So I know they're anxious to know what the answer is. And we've got some work to do with the development agreements too. So, the Community Development Committee only meets quarterly, and they do happen to meet next week.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Strand?
Yes.
Preston?
Aye.
Garrig?
No.
Pepcorn?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. Next, recommendation for the authorization of staff to submit request for public partnership tax increment financing for redevelopment NP parking lot site at the city's financial advisors to review.
This is a concept for another public-private partnership, very similar to what we've done with both Roberts Commons and Mercantile. Our new process that you had adopted late last year is to have taken this to the Economic Development Committee, which we had done last fall. And then your decision tonight would be to decide whether or not we would basically continue to work on this in earnest to get a financial advisor involved. This site is, like I think Robertson Mercantile, very suitable for redevelopment. This would be a three-way partnership with Global Development. Global Development owns this Herbst building located here. It's a former location of CI Apparel, about a 50,000 square foot building that's now vacant. Global Development also owns about the east 40% of this parking lot. The city owns this western 60% of the parking lot. The proposed redevelopment, Global Development would redevelop the Herbst building. They've considered an event center if there was sufficient parking. They've also looked at some sort of a boutique hotel. They've asked Kilbourne Group to be part of the redevelopment. This is a drawing of how the main floor would look. There would be commercial space along NP. This would be the apartment lobby. These would be housing units, possibly converted to condos in the future. The second level would be more parking, apartments against NP and to the west. This would be the third floor. There would be a outdoor public space for the apartment residents. And then this floor would continue up for an additional 4 or 5 levels. So this is just an image of it. The recommended motion is that if we're going to go any further and seeing if this is feasible, we would need to talk to our financial advisor, PFM, who does the due diligence to determine whether or not any incentives are needed. We would need to be working with Baker Tilly, our financial advisor who deals with bond sales, to see how this could be financed. The general concept would be the city would own the parking garage and the private developer would do the rest of it. So in order for us to get legal involved with the development agreement, get financial advisors involved with bonding and financial analysis, we would need your support. So the recommended motion is to proceed with the development of the renewal plan, a development agreement, the city financial advisor review, and a financing plan for the parking ramp.
Do I have a motion?
I'd so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions, Jim, but with this shared private-owned land and publicly owned land, and I think I heard you say that the publicly owned land is 60% of that parking lot, maybe more. What's the value of that land? Or that property?
Yeah, probably a better question for the city assessor. I mean, anyway, $20 a square foot, I'm not sure how, the wild guess.
And if I might continue, this is really an exciting project, but I guess the first question that comes to my mind is, was there any opportunity for anybody else in the public to say, like, I'd like to bid on that, or I'd like to submit a proposal on that, or have we asked for RFPs on that, or are we giving them a chance to ever, like, say, hey, I got an idea, could I buy it?
Again, the city owns 60% of the site, and so I did visit with Global Development and suggested that the city and Global Development jointly do an RFP to see what kind of development proposals they have. I think they might have had some, I don't know, Warren Ackley is here from Global Development. I don't think, maybe he could best address why they felt they'd like to bring Kilbourne Group in on it rather than some other developer or architect or do it themselves. But if we own the entire site, that certainly would be a good way to go. But in this case, if we just make our property available for development, we really don't get there's really not enough room to do both the parking and development. So, I don't know, Warren, do you want to address that?
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Jim, do you know how long that's been sitting empty, vacant like that? Is it 60 years?
I think the former use of the property was an NSP power plant, and so.
Over 60 years.
Yeah,
So I think it's good. It'd be good to get it developed. Otherwise, we can just leave it the way it is for another 60 years.
Yeah, this property was owned by the railroad up until 20 years ago, and so they weren't able to, or they weren't really willing to sell it. We ended up buying a portion of it. Global Development bought a portion of it, and so that's how the ownership came to be. We traded a little bit to adjust property lines later.
Warren, you want to address that?
The Warren Ackley from Global Development.
Thank you. Well, we wanted to work with the Kilbourne Brook just because of what we've seen them do in downtown Fargo up to this point. The Mercantile Building, the Robert Street Commons, also the Block 9 building, tremendous for our city. And just the look of the buildings has been, we think, has been fantastic. The other thing that we appreciated about the Kilbourne Group is how the construction didn't debilitate the streets in downtown. They were able to keep Broadway open, at least one lane of it open, throughout the construction of Block 9, which was tremendous. So there will be some issues with NP Avenue that I think this group can take care of, and we just think they're do an outstanding job.
Mr. Strand, you want to ask him any question?
Thank you. This is a great project. My question is to us is, what are our statutory requirements if we have a public asset that we're passing on to sell? I would guess we're obligated to get the best dollar we can out of it by law.
You know, when you go into a public-private partnership, similar to Block 9, there's a lot of flexibility in the state law in terms of working with a private developer on a fee-based thing and proposal. And so we did a lot of research that before we did Block 9. In that instance, too, we didn't really have an RFP because we owned a portion of the site, they owned a portion of the site. And so I don't know, Nancy, if you want to try to address any of that, but we worked with Dorsey, in addition to the city attorney's office. And so there's certainly a legal way to do it. We've done it in the past. It's a different section of the law that's not used that often, but allows a lot of flexibility for these types of redevelopments.
And I'm afraid I can't really weigh in on that. That would have been something that Eric had worked on. So I could certainly look into what those agreements were and the statutory guidance for that if you wish.
Can I have excuse me, Mr. President?
So, Jim, the public part of this is going to be the parking ramp, right? So I know that you're working on an update on the parking study. Can you just talk a little bit briefly about how many parking spaces we're talking here and how that relates to the residential needs right in this project and how many spaces would be available for others?
I'm glad you mentioned the parking study because we should, and we will have that information prior to starting on this. This would be roughly 600 parking spots. And so part of that parking study, we're trying to understand what Global's needs are. There'd be about 190 apartments. Because you can use those, about half of them are gone during the day, probably 100 of them would go for the apartments. But one of the things we're looking at is there's about 200,000 vacant square feet of office space downtown. So if that fills, there's potential for development across the street. So we have Walker Consultants coming up with a number where we think our parking need is going to be because we don't want to build 400 if we need 600 or 600 if we really need 400. So we'll have a good answer for that prior to starting.
Commissioner Garrick.
Jim, we've gone around for years on the parking stuff, but I just want to reiterate to the public that every ramp that we own, we lose money on. Mercantile, City of Fargo loses money. Robert Street, City of Fargo loses money. And when the TIFs come off, we're going to be losing hundreds of thousands of dollars every year per ramp. The more ramps we build, the more we'll be in debt. And at some point, they're going to need repairs, 20, 30 years from now. So these assets will be losing dollars, then we'll need repairs, we'll go in further debt, and we'll have to find a way to pay for that. This is a bad idea. We need to stop doing it.
Yeah, I guess I would disagree that once the ramps are paid for, they tend to generate more income than they cost annually, including the cost of repairs.
Commissioner Pipcorn.
Sure, Mr. Chair, just a couple of things. First of all, we maintain the ramps all the time. We're actually, that's what Walker Consultants, that's their specialty. So we are doing all we can to keep them in tip-top shape. And I can't remember, how much did we sell the Island Park ramp for to Bell Bank? What was that?
About 9.4 million.
9.4 million. That's pretty good. I'd take that. That doesn't seem like we were losing money on that one. 9.4 million.
Commissioner Preston.
Well, and we have to remember that these parking ramps are adding value to the surrounding properties. So whether they actually make a profit or not, they are supporting the density of development that's going on around. And we wouldn't be able to have that if we didn't have parking ramps, so.
Commissioner Garrett.
The Island Park ramp had a 40-year TIF on it. It didn't pay a dime in taxes to the school board, park board, the city of Fargo at large, the parks, the airport, vector control. All that money went to its own self and to that area within its own TIF. So when you say you sold it for $9 million, after 40 years, if I told you to give me money and I'll give you $9 million in 40 years, you wouldn't do it.
So, Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Pipcorn.
first of all, it's very important to have leaders that have vision. If you want to have the downtown with a bunch of flat parking lots, that's what we've had for 30 years. If you think that's good, then that's what you need to elect, more people without vision. If you want to have a downtown, look at what's gone on with Roco. When that happens, look at the surrounding area. It has a positive impact. Mercantile, look at downtown Fargo compared to 25 years ago. If you want to have flat parking lots, then just keep up the good work. Otherwise, you got to have vision and you have to have a little bit of courage. You have to take a risk. But now we don't have a bunch of flat parking lots. And Mike Allmendinger's here. The vision is we want to get rid of every one of those flat parking lots. That's what we want to have, a beautiful downtown with everybody, with workforce housing, with housing for everybody. That's what we want. Or maybe we don't want that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is a really important dialogue. We should almost have it at a brown bag. These are new policies, evolved policies with our Tax Exempt Review Committee. For example, I'm going to excerpt here from our policy, our new policy, with regard to TIFs and public-private partnerships. The process will involve discussions and so on. Typically, there will be a difficult-to-develop site and a need for public infrastructure and or developer assistance to make developmentally, financially feasible or physically possible. What's difficult to develop about this site? Not blighted. Or what is it? Help me know. What is it about this site that says that there's a need for a TIF?
Trying to finance the parking facility. If we don't build a parking facility, it will stay as a surface parking lot.
Mr. Chairman, can I jump in real quick? One of the difficulties about building downtown is the staging of the construction. If you're doing greenfield construction, you just put everything on the ground right next to it and build. In the downtown, like Warren was talking about, we want to keep the streets open. You want to, and to, I'm sure we could have a lot of the builders talk about you have to stage everything and have it come in the right order. That's the first thing. But even before that is assembling the property. If you're building greenfields out in South Fargo, you just buy a big chunk of land. In downtown Fargo, and once again, we can talk about that, multiple owners of some of these properties, and not all of them have the same timeline. That's the challenge to get the downtown redeveloped, is to assemble the property. That may be one of the biggest challenges almost every time. And so there are significant challenges to redevelop the downtown, and it's critically important. Our downtown is the center, not just of Fargo and not just of Cass County. We're the regional center for eastern North Dakota and western Minnesota. So it's very important. That's what we are. And so that's why we as leaders, we can't just look just about the downtown community partnership. We are the leaders for the whole area. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One other thing, the factor is the infrastructure on NP is going to need to be upgraded. So that's one of the other challenges. We're not looking at using TIF for that, but that'll be another thing. We need to rebuild some of our streets if we're going to have development.
Commissioner Preston.
I just have a question, Jim, in regards to what's underground this. You had indicated it had been an electrical substation or something. Could there be some underground concerns, issues that need to be dealt with?
Yeah, those are going to need to be looked at. After we acquired the property from the railroad, I believe when we put the asphalt down, I think we had a few tanks. I don't know, Warren, if you recall.
We did do a lot of the excavation of that. So it's pretty much gone.
Which would qualify for TIF.
Yes. So, I think Warren wanted to say hi to Randy too.
Oh, yes. Hi, Randy.
Okay.
As my partner is on vacation, he would have been here, but he asked me to say hello to him.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tran.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add, as far as, a development of downtown. I mean, I've been downtown for 42 years, and it's been tremendous to see the growth. And part of that growth are the ramps. The other part is apartments. We think this is a very exciting project. And we have a building that's 50,000 square feet without additional parking. That probably won't be developed. We need parking downtown. With Bell Bank coming in as well, there is going to be a tremendous need for parking.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you. And again, I think this is a great project. However, I believe we should put it out for an RFP or a bidding process so we for sure know whether there's any other interest in the public to buy or invest in this asset. I just think that's a basic thing to do when it's a public asset. I would expect that it'll end up being where it's at. If it isn't, we'll go, good, we're glad we did that. And I'm not so sure, and I'd like a legal clarification when we have a public asset. You can't give stuff away. You have to be very careful how you steward and disperse public property or assets. This is not a $25 item.
Mr. Chair, you can give stuff away if you're leasing space at the airport.
Let's not get into that. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Preston?
Aye.
Garrick?
No.
Strand?
No.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item 27, report on crimes in the city of Fargo. Chief Sabowski to explain.
Good evening, Commissioners. Providing you a couple of snapshots of some issues that we've continued to be working on at the police department, and I'm happy to take any questions. The first one has to do with traffic in general and speeding specifically. We know that we've had a lot of speeding issues throughout the city for some time, especially in the non-winter months. And I think we talked about this issue at a previous commission meeting. First thing I want to just make sure everyone understands is that for our officers to enforce traffic violations, they have to witness the violation. So we're unable to use technology like red light cameras or other technology that captures the license plate, associates it to a car, and then issue a ticket like they would the Illinois tollway and things of that nature. So we have to witness the violations, which means we have to be there and then take enforcement action. On a positive note, from a speeding perspective, looking at the last couple of years of data, our speeding citations are actually up significantly from 2020 and slightly above where we were in 2019, which was our pre-COVID year. And then there's some other different speeding categories that are included in there that I also put in just for your awareness, different levels of the exhibition driving, the drag racing, things that we see a lot in the summer and the warmer months. We continue to work on those types of things. And what we also do periodically is directed enforcement missions throughout the year. So the last one that we did was late October over about a 5 or 6 day period where we target specific neighborhoods where we're having a lot of complaints from the community about speeding and things of that nature. And over that period of time, we hit Rose Creek, Bennett, South Point, and then on the north end, Roosevelt neighborhood, that 10th Street corridor, and issued 71 citations, 57 of which were speeding related as well. So we continue to work on that in a number of different ways. We're prepping for when the snow does melt, what we're going to do in the spring. As you may recall, we got our motorcycles out of mothball last year. We trained several of our officers to be certified to operate those police motorcycles. And they made it out later in the year into the fall, but that'll be a component we'll have all of this year once the snow melts. for traffic enforcement. We'll continue to utilize our partners, and we've had missions already with North Dakota Highway Patrol and Cass County, specifically targeting these areas where we're seeing some of this erratic driving. And I think as we previously discussed, there's a lot of issues with autos that don't stop. And our officers and most in the region won't initiate a pursuit for a traffic violation alone because of the safety issues that it brings to the public and the officer. But we do have an ordinance that was brought to our attention in which we can utilize owner responsibility for violations that are non-criminal. The speeding violations and the ones that I showed you on the chart, with the exception of reckless driving, are all non-criminal. And so we're able to go to the registered owner should the car flee and either find out who was driving or potentially issue them the citation for the violation. And then recently, I've also been approached by one legislator who is interested in discussing some potential legislative fixes to the fleeing and the owner responsibility relative to fleeing, things of that nature. So that's traffic, kind of in a nutshell. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Preston.
define reckless driving.
That would be, so if you remember back last fall, we actually had a person that was going 105 miles an hour, 100 something. So that excessive speed in that populated area would be reckless driving. So there's a number of different ways these things can go, but it has to do with, the level of danger to the community and that type of thing. And that's a Class B misdemeanor.
Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Chief. This information is always good. Not long ago, I heard from a citizen who shared a story that they witnessed something out in their front yard and they watched it all unfold, and then they approached the law enforcement afterwards and they were told, well, we can't, we knew there were warrants against some of these individuals, but we couldn't arrest them and take them in because the jail was full. Is that really going on?
Well, COVID has put us in a compromising position at times because of capacity. We've been working with the sheriff on this. He's been working very hard on this as well, but it's to some extent out of our control. If they have a COVID outbreak in the jail, they have to cordon off areas of the jail, less capacity. The jail was initially set up with 2 per cell. When COVID hit, we can't put 2 per cell if there's COVID going on. And so they've actually been working on creating single cell capacity. And it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the last 2 years, whether there's an outbreak or not an outbreak in terms of their ability to take people into the jail. They have always found a way to take in violent offenders and things of that nature, but we have had to deal with that, yes. Last piece, and kind of related, and just some snapshot crime data. So this is preliminary. North Dakota agencies have until March 10th to submit information to the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation. After that, they do a validation of the data, and then they publish the annual numbers for the year prior. So these preliminary numbers may change a bit, probably not too much, but in terms of comparing with other cities and then nationally, with the FBI data, their preliminary will come out in June, and their final will come out in September for the 2021 data, so that we can make some apples to apples comparisons in terms of cities our size and cities in our region. But the other thing I think it's important related to the commissioner's question also about arrests. So in North Dakota, law enforcement officers cannot arrest someone for a misdemeanor, with a couple of exceptions, unless it happens in their presence. So crimes like theft, fraud, vandalism, simple assault, things of those nature that don't happen in the officer's presence, we can't make a physical arrest and take them to jail. If the person is still there, we can stop and detain them, identify them, potentially get a statement from them, but we have to refer that then to the state's attorney's office, and they make a prosecutorial decision about whether or not to proceed. So that's not necessarily up to the officer. Felony cases, robberies, burglaries, things of that nature, as long as we have probable cause, we can make a summary arrest and take that person to the jail. So sometimes that gets confusing for people, and I think sometimes causes some angst with the public, because they would expect that we would be able to take this person and remove them from the neighborhood, but by law we can't always do that. And then just a little preliminary crime numbers 2020 to 2021, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Pepcorn?
so I had an email from a pawn shop where they had an individual that was upset, leaving the business, damaged some cars. They called the police came, they showed them the pictures, they showed them the video, and then they didn't do anything. They didn't take him to jail, like you said, like they weren't there. I think if you're not careful, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Because I think once criminals start finding out that nothing happens to them, and then once the public finds out that you're not arresting criminals or nothing's happening to them, I think you're going to see frustration grow, and I think you might see people take matters into their own hands. And so I think that's the risk. To me, if I see somebody damage my car, I see them, I have evidence, and then the police come and then they don't do anything to them, I would be very upset. So I guess that's my editorial comments, but it doesn't make sense to me. To me, now we have criminals committing crimes, we have evidence, and the police do nothing. That's not good. That's not a good recipe. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Strand?
Commissioner Pepper, that's really an interesting topic. Maybe that's one we could discuss internally, whether under Home Rule Charter, we have authorities to affect any of these policies, or to what degree.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as I understand,
Mr.
it's
Preston.
state law.
It is state law.
Yeah.
It's always been state law.
But I'm understanding the pawn shop, there is a gentleman that videoed it, and it is in the state's attorney's hands right now, is it not?
Correct. Yeah, and so once the state's attorney reviews a case like that, if they're going to issue the case, they'll issue a summons. We can go out and summons them to court. If they don't show up, they can be arrested, and it proceeds through the criminal justice system from there.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm assuming that your police officers tell the victim of the crime that that's the process, and that indeed something may very well occur with the...
Yes, they should be, and in all cases, maybe that's not happening, but again, it's kind of an education for everybody.
Commissioner Pickburn?
So, Mr. Chair, I just think I'm just putting myself in that position. If I saw the person do the damage and then nothing happens to him, I would be very frustrated.
Go talk to the state legislators.
No, and I agree, and I'm just saying, this is not good. Because the other thing is, if criminals realize that they don't get in any trouble, that's not a good recipe. So I think we have some things there, like Commissioner Strand talked about, this might be something that we need to talk about, so we as a group can maybe go help the legislature clarify this, because I think that this might be a reach, but at a pawn shop, do you know what they have a lot of? They have a lot of guns at a pawn shop. And if I'm the pawn shop owner and if some guy starts wrecking my stuff, I'm just saying. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's not pull out that gun. I did talk to the pawn shop owners, and they understood it better after we sat down and talked to them. It's very much an education, which the state's attorney hopefully will charge it, and this person will be taken care of. Any other discussion on this? Then you have the hate crime update, please.
Yes, so the last quarter of 2021, this is again pursuant to city ordinance that requires a quarterly report on our new hate crime ordinances. For the quarter, and you've got a report that has everything for the year, but just to focus on the quarter unless there's questions, we had 3 incidents that would qualify. On one of those, we actually had our first use of the simple assault hate crime ordinance that was issued by our city prosecutor's office and is pending trial. That occurred in a local bar. There was another incident here where the individual committing the crime, due to mental health issues, was in essence not able to form intent to commit a crime, and that was not prosecuted. And another case where it also was not prosecuted based on the circumstances. So we've got one victory, if you will, in the use of that ordinance, and that ends out the quarter. Any questions on that report?
Any questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Item 29, application of property tax exemptions for improvements made to buildings. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Horn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Preston?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Commissioner Strand, do you have anybody's birthdays or anniversaries or happy dates?
Well, you know, I missed Michael Redlinger's birthday, and I know Kember's is coming up, but that's my list.
Thank you very much. Move to adjourn?
So move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.